My name is Madeline Kermas, but everybody knows me as Mandy. I work as a diversion project, part of the Pathfinders project at Newport Police Station, which is funded at the moment by the police, and Women's Aid got the contract. I've been there for a few months. We deal with women who have committed first-time offenders like shoplifting, assault, drunk and disorderly. So instead of getting charged, they get diverted to our project. So I'm meeting a lot of more women than I would have normally in Women's Aid. But I've been with Women's Aid in Newport for 25 years. Plus I was a volunteer with Rhymney Valley Women's Aid, as it was then, it's now Llamau, for 4.5 years. I was married and my partner was an alcoholic and he became violent. I kept going back to him, leaving him, going back to him. It was like a merry-go-round. I didn't know what I was doing. I went for help to Al-Anon, which is a fellowship for helping families of alcoholics. And I picked up a leaflet when I was at the probation office with him for Women's Aid, and I kept it in my bag. And I thought, right, the next time, I usually call it the 3-day syndrome. You're angry, there's something happens, you're angry, you can't stand him, you leave. The next day he might phone you, but you've calmed down, you're still not going, you're adamant, no, I'm not going back. But the third day, he's telling you how much he loves you, you're thinking back to when you first met, you want to go home. So you go back and then it happens again, and then you go into denial. And your self-worth just goes down and down. Because I went into Al-Anon, and they helped me tremendously. And also to accept that you couldn't help your feelings, they just are. And you haven't got to stay in a violent situation. An incident occurred and I rang Women's Aid, who were marvellous, and I went into their refuge. And my daughter at the time was about 16 months old. And I think the reason I went then is because I had to protect her. If it had only been me, maybe I wouldn't have had the courage to leave. And I thought, I've got to save my child. So I went into the refuge and spent 6 months there. We had to share. You're living with people who you don't know and different personalities. It wasn't easy, but at the same time I felt safe. And it was child orientated. Whereas when I went to stay with family and friends when I'd leave him, you always felt in the way. Whereas in the refuge, it was like, well, I got a right to be here as much as anybody else. So then I got housed by the local council in Caerphilly, and Women's Aid in Caerphilly had a mother and toddler group. So I stayed in touch because my little girl then was 2 by the time I left the refuge. And they asked me then in the following September, would I like to be a volunteer and go on their management? And they said, can you be secretary? And I said, no, I can't do that. They said, yes, you can. I went to Women's Aid then as a volunteer. I did the minutes, which I thought, I can't do them, but I did. And I did that for 4.5 years. I had to say, what did you say about that? Where did that funding come from? And everything was like, without realising, I was learning an awful lot. And I think the codes of practice were coming out at that time from Welsh Women's Aid. They were just getting them together. Got the job as office coordinator in Newport Women's Aid. And really, I haven't looked back. But I remember listening to Martin Bell at the overseas report on the television. And somebody once said to him, do you ever get a bit complacent about it? He said, if I ever did that, I couldn't do the job. And to a certain extent, that's how I feel in my job. Because never mind how much paperwork you got, how much computer work you got to do other things within the job, as soon as you meet that woman who's just come out of a violent relationship, whoosh, it all comes back. And you've got the compassion there, and all you want to do is help. And I've never ever lost that. That is always there. And because I can share, which I don't mind, I share my experiences with them, and immediately they feel, oh gosh, it's not only me. I can see the relief in their face because they see me then like coming in with my little clipboard or something, and they think, oh, she probably hasn't had anything wrong in her life. And then I start to tell them, they feel better. And then I can also be honest with them and help them to sometimes just give people up, because that's what you've got to do sometimes. But when I first went in the refuge, I felt frightened. I didn't know what to expect. And it is a bit daunting, But because it was child orientated, and that was good, I always say to the women, because when I first went in, I didn't feel as if I had a right to be there, really, because the other people were already settled in. I felt like an outsider. So that's why I go out of my way now to say to the new ones coming in, now don't forget, you've got a right to be here as much as anybody else, because obviously it does get a bit clicky sometimes. You can have a few and they settled and a new one comes in. So I make sure I always say that. It's much better in the refuge now because the women have got their own room. They have got a key to their own room. They have got a television. Well, in our refuge, which we have. They can stay in their room or they can come out and mix with the others as much or as little as they want to, which is lovely, really. I remember seeing, like, on the walls, you know, more, like I say, political, but I mean, it's all, you know, for women's rights. And then I met Women's Aid Crowd and I thought, oh my gosh, to think that I'd met a lot of thinking women. And the other thing is that I must say is when I did leave the refuge, I never felt alone again. That's the main thing. I knew that I could always pop in their office. I just always knew they were there. And that was so comforting. I felt like a failure going into Women's Aid because I was an independent person. I'd always looked after myself. I'd never asked for help. But now when I look back, to me, that was the first step of self-worth, that I was worth saving. So that's what I tell people now, asking for help, because we all need each other. When I was working in the refuge, I mean, gosh, it's busy, and it still is. There wasn't a day went by that I had to look at my watch because there was so much going on. And the children usually like it in the refuge because they got other children to play with and it's an adventure. That's the wonderful part of the job. And then, of course, when they get rehoused, then that's the lovely part, is then they're moving on to a new life. So it is lovely. It's very rewarding in that sense, you know, and you can help to make a difference to people's lives.